I heard my mother's voice slice through the music at my own wedding like a knife. "Good Lord, Emily," she said loudly enough for the entire front row to hear. "That dress looks like something off a clearance rack at Walmart. I thought you were at least going to try not to embarrass us today." Every fork stopped. Every whisper died. I stood there in my cheap wedding dress bouquet trembling in my hand, staring at my parents as they shook their heads in disgust. An hour later, those same people would find out the truth. The dress they mocked cost $60,000. My husband's family owned the fashion house, half the guests were wearing, and my parents' invite to our future had already been quietly revoked. But in that moment, all I felt was the familiar burn of shame. And I'll be honest with you, right then I decided I was done being their family failure. That's the part everyone remembers, the public humiliation. What they don't know is how I got there. My name is Emily Carter, and if you had met me a few years ago, you probably would have thought I had a pretty decent life. I grew up in a modest neighborhood just outside Richmond, Virginia. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor either. My dad liked to say we were respectable middle class. We didn't talk about feelings in our house. We talked about what people would think. My father worried what his boss would think if he didn't show up in a freshly pressed shirt. My mother worried what the ladies at church would think if we didn't have matching outfits for Easter. That obsession with image had a price, and most of the time I was the one who paid it. I was the older daughter, the one who stayed home with Grandma when Mom had meetings and Dad had important dinners. I was the one who learned to make meatloaf from the church cookbook because somebody had to get dinner on the table when Mom was too tired from organizing the charity fashion show. I was the one who worked at the grocery store through high school and went to community college to save money. And then there was my younger sister, Lily. If you looked up golden child in the dictionary, you'd see Lily's picture. Blonde, willowy, big blue eyes. She was the star of every school play, the center of every photo, the one my parents introduced as our bright, talented Lily. She's going places. Me, I was Emily. She helps out. By the time Lily got to high school, my parents had decided she was destined to be a model. Every spare dollar went to headshots classes and investment pieces for her wardrobe. They bragged to anyone who would listen about agencies she'd talked to and brands she would surely represent. Meanwhile, I was working double shifts at the local pharmacy trying to keep up with my classes. I learned early that the only security I could count on was whatever I scraped together myself. Maybe that's why when I met Michael, I didn't care that he drove an old pickup truck and wore the same pair of boots for 3 years straight. I met him at the pharmacy of all places. He came in one night near closing, arms full of cold medicine and ginger ale. His father had the flu, he said, and his mother was worn out taking care of him. There was this gentle way he spoke about his parents that caught me off guard. It sounded respectful and warm. We started talking. A week later, he came back for more ginger ale and accidentally forgot his change. A note was paperclipped to the receipt. "If you're ever not working on a Saturday, there's a little diner off Route 10 that does real pancakes, not those frozen ones." Michael. I almost threw the note away. Then I thought about my parents, about how my mother had sighed that morning when I mentioned I might take an extra class at the community college. Why she'd asked. "You're just going to end up working some little job anyway. We need to focus on Lily's future." So I kept the note. That Saturday, I sat across from Michael in a cracked vinyl booth, while a waitress with a name tag that said, "Dot" poured coffee and called everyone hon. The pancakes were as good as he promised, warm, buttery, not fancy, but real. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe around someone. Michael asked about my family, and I found myself telling him the truth instead of the polished version. He didn't flinch. He didn't say I was overreacting when I described my parents' obsession with Lily's modeling career. He just listened, brow slightly furrowed. When I asked about his family, he shrugged. "We've got a family business. It's been around a long time." "What kind of business?" I asked. "Clothing," he said simply. "We make dresses, suits, that kind of thing." I remember laughing and saying, "Well, maybe one day my sister will model for you." He gave me a look I didn't understand at the time, half amusement, half something else. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Maybe." Back then, I had no idea what clothing really meant in his world. I didn't know about the factories in North Carolina, the flagship store in New York, the runway shows. I had no idea that the label my mother drooled over in glossy magazines was stamped on almost everything his family produced. All I knew was that for the first time in my life, someone was looking at me, not the image of me, not the helpful older daughter, but me, and he liked what he saw. So when you picture me at that wedding standing there in the dress my mother called cheap, don't just see a bride in white. See a lifetime of being overlooked piling up behind my eyes. Because I wasn't just hearing them insult a piece of fabric. I was hearing every time they'd told me I wasn't enough. And I was finally ready to do something about it. Before I tell you what happened after the wedding, you need to understand the years that led up to that moment, the quiet wounds, the 1,000 small cuts that taught me exactly where I stood in my own family. Because the humiliation in that bridal suite wasn't new. It was simply the first time there were enough people watching for anyone else to notice. I grew up in a one-story brick house on the outskirts of Richmond, tucked at the end of a cul-de-sac where everyone knew one another's business. Our neighbors mowed their lawns every Saturday morning. Folks still waved when they drove by. People brought casseroles when someone was sick. On the outside, it looked like the perfect slice of American suburbia. Inside our home, though, everything revolved around appearances, how we looked, how we were perceived, whether we measured up to whatever imaginary standard my parents believed the world expected of us. If there was one sentence that defined my childhood, it was this one: Emily, don't embarrass us. I heard it before school plays: don't embarrass us on stage. Before church: don't embarrass us with that wrinkled dress. Before bringing home report cards, at least try to make us proud for once. I never knew what would trigger their disapproval, only that something always did. And then Lily was born. I was 6 when she arrived, all soft curls and bright eyes, the kind of baby strangers cooed over in grocery stores. Mom loved telling the story of how the nurse looked at Lily and said, "This one's going to break hearts." She never told any story like that about me. As Lily grew, the favoritism grew with her. Every dance recital, every school event, every birthday, Mom and Dad treated her like a small-town celebrity. They bragged endlessly about her beauty, her promise, her future potential. Meanwhile, I was the reliable one, the helper, the one they asked to watch Lily when they needed to go out, the one they asked to clean, straighten, fetch, deliver. But what hurt wasn't the tasks, it was the message behind them. You're useful, Emily. Your sister is exceptional. By high school, the difference between us had become the central axis of our family. Dad coached Lily through her first modeling audition, like he was preparing her for the Olympics. Mom bought expensive photo sessions and enrolled her in runway workshops. They even cut back on grocery spending so Lily could buy a pair of designer heels every model needs. Meanwhile, I was working 30 hours a week at the local grocery store to afford gas and books for community college. I don't think they meant to wound me. Not intentionally, at least. Some people are so blinded by their own expectations that they don't see who gets hurt in the shadows they cast. But the effect was real. By the time I was 22, I had learned to shrink myself just to keep the household peace. So imagine their reaction when I brought home a boyfriend. Michael didn't play the game my parents valued. He wasn't flashy, he didn't brag, he didn't talk about status or goals or social climbing. He was quiet, observant kind, with a warm steadiness that made me feel seen in ways I didn't even know I needed. I still remember the dinner where I introduced him. Mom looked at his truck when he pulled up and whispered, "Oh dear." Dad asked about his job, and when Michael explained he worked in operations for his family business, Dad nodded absent-mindedly, clearly unimpressed. Lily didn't bother hiding her smirk. "So like inventory?" she asked. Michael just smiled politely, not giving them more than they deserved. That night after we left, I apologized to him. He squeezed my hand and said, "Em, you don't owe me an apology for anyone else's behavior." It was the first time in my life someone had ever told me that. But the real shift happened slowly over months, in the moments between our dates, when Michael would ask what I wanted from life, what I dreamed of, what made me happy. Nobody had ever asked me those questions sincerely. Mom only cared about what made Lily shine. Dad only cared about what made the neighbors approve. Michael listened like my voice mattered. And bit by bit I started to believe it did. My parents, however, hated that. Not overtly. They never confronted me directly. But the comments began. "Don't get too comfortable, Emily. Men like him don't stay long. You could do better if you tried harder. I hope he's not expecting you to support him." They always couched their criticisms as concern. That was their favorite disguise. The truth was simple. They didn't think he was good enough for them, so they assumed he couldn't be good enough for me. But what they really feared was losing control. For the first time, I wasn't shaping myself around their expectations. I wasn't dimming my light so Lily could shine brighter. I was choosing someone who valued who I was, not who I looked like. And that terrified them. One night, after a particularly tense dinner where Dad criticized Michael's shirt, not even pressed, Michael and I took a quiet walk through my neighborhood. The air smelled like pine and distant fire pits. A few porch lights flicked on as people settled in for the evening. "You know," he said gently, "your parents don't see you." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. "But I do," he added, "and so does my family." I blinked. "Your family?" He smiled, but in a thoughtful, almost nostalgic way. "They'd like to meet you. I've been waiting until the time felt right." I didn't know then what that truly meant, or how completely it would change everything. I had no idea that Michael's family business wasn't just a clothing company. It was the clothing company, the one whose labels my mother worshipped, the one Lily dreamed of modeling for, the one shaping American fashion for decades. I had no idea my life was about to collide with a world my parents spent their whole lives chasing. All I knew was that for the first time someone wanted me not for what I could do, not for how I made them look, but simply for who I was. And that small truth would eventually become the foundation of everything that followed: the humiliation, the revelations, and yes, the revenge. I wish I could tell you that after that tense introduction my parents softened toward Michael, or at least behaved themselves. But that would be a lie, and this story doesn't work without the truth. Their disapproval only deepened as our relationship grew, and by the time we got engaged, my mother was already rehearsing excuses to give her friends about why Emily didn't choose something more appropriate. But nothing compared to the storm that brewed the day I chose my wedding dress. People imagine wedding dress shopping as a magical moment: champagne bubbles, soft music, mothers tearing up as their daughter steps onto a pedestal and twirls. Mine was nothing like that. I went alone. Mom claimed she was busy helping Lily prepare for an important photo shoot, and Dad said dress shopping wasn't really his domain. So it was just me, a quiet Tuesday morning in a bridal boutique tucked between a bakery and a hardware store on a sleepy stretch of downtown Richmond. The boutique owner, a woman in her late 50s named Marianne, greeted me with a kind smile. "Shopping by yourself today, sweetheart?" I nodded. "Seems that way." She didn't pry. She simply led me inside, the bell chiming softly behind us. The racks of dresses glowed under warm lighting, lace, satin, tulle, beadwork, everything from elaborate ball gowns to sleek silhouettes. They were beautiful, but overwhelming. I fingered a sleeve of embroidered lace and whispered, "I don't even know what I'm supposed to look for." Marianne touched my arm. "Then let's look for something that feels like you." It was the first time anyone had said those words during the entire wedding process. I tried on dress after dress that day. Some were too poofy, some swallowed me whole, others made me feel like I was auditioning for a role rather than preparing for a marriage. But then she brought out a gown unlike the others, simple, graceful, elegant without shouting. A soft ivory silk with a subtle sheen fitted bodice and a clean flowing skirt that moved like water. No glitter, no dramatic train, no screaming for attention. It felt quiet, calm, honest. I slipped it on and stepped onto the pedestal. For a moment I didn't recognize myself in the mirror. Not because I looked different, but because I looked like the woman I always hoped to be, someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Marianne's eyes softened. "That's the one." I felt tears prick my eyes, but I laughed instead. "My mother will hate it." "Then it's absolutely the right dress," she said with a wink. We both laughed, but her words lingered. I turned slowly, admiring the way the silk draped and moved. I love it." "Then let's make it yours." I braced myself for the price. My budget was modest. I'd saved carefully, tucking away money from every paycheck. I wasn't expecting anything extravagant. But instead of handing me a price tag, Marianne disappeared into the back. When she returned, she wasn't alone. A tall, elegant woman with silver-streaked hair walked out beside her, someone I recognized instantly. Michael's aunt, his mother's older sister. Emily, she said warmly, we were hoping you'd come in today. I blinked. You knew I was coming. She smiled knowingly. We know more than you think, sweetheart. Michael told the family you might stop by soon. Before I could respond, Mary Ann handed her a small envelope. The woman opened it, glanced inside, and nodded. She turned to me. This dress is a gift from our family to you, an official welcome. My breath caught. A gift. But I can't accept something like that. I can pay. No, she said, gently placing a hand over mine. Our family believes that love should be celebrated with beauty. And you deserve something made with care, not compromise. I swallowed hard. But isn't this one of the designer gowns? It looks expensive. The woman's smile deepened. Sweetheart, this is one of our couture pieces. It's worth $60,000. I nearly choked. 60 what? She laughed. Don't worry. If we wanted flashy value, we'd have shown you one of the gowns Lily has been begging to model for. But this dress, this one has character. Quiet confidence. It's exactly right for you. I shook my head, overwhelmed. I can't believe your family would do this for me. Emily, she said softly, you've spent your whole life giving, supporting, stepping aside. Let someone give to you for once. Let someone celebrate you. Her words hit a place inside me I didn't realize was empty. I nodded slowly. Okay, thank you, truly. The fitting continued with laughter and gentle conversation. Not once did Michael's aunt mention the brand name. Not once did she boast or hint at the empire behind the silk. She treated me like a daughter, a friend, not a charity case or a project. When I walked out of that boutique garment bag in hand, I felt something unfamiliar, joy without apology. Of course, that joy lasted until the moment my parents saw the dress. A week later, I invited them to my apartment for a quick preview. I hoped naively, perhaps, that they'd surprise me. That maybe for once they'd see me instead of critiquing me. But the second I stepped out of the bedroom wearing the dress, my mother's face tightened. That's it, she asked. That's the dress you're wearing in front of everyone. Dad crossed his arms. It looks plain, Emily, like you didn't even try. I swallowed. I did try. This is the one that felt right. Felt right, Mom snapped. You're getting married, not going to jury duty. Lily let out a giggle. Yeah, Em, that looks like something off the clearance rack at a thrift store. They didn't know. They didn't know the dress they mocked cost $60,000. They didn't know their beloved Lily's dream brand belonged to the very family I was joining. They didn't know that while they sneered, half their closets were filled with clothes from the empire they believed was too good for me. But I knew, and for once knowing was enough. As I stood there letting their criticisms wash over me, something inside me shifted. They thought they were tearing me down. They were actually setting the stage for their own downfall. Because someday soon they were going to discover the truth about that dress and the truth about me. And they would have to choke on every cruel word they'd ever spoken. I didn't fully understand who Michael was, not really, until the first time I visited his parents' home. And even then I didn't realize the magnitude of what I was stepping into. All I knew was that something about his family felt different, grounded, steady in a way my own had never been. If my parents lived on a stage performing for a crowd that didn't exist, Michael's family lived in the real world where people mattered more than appearances. It was late autumn when he invited me to meet them properly. The sun was setting earlier each day, painting the trees in deep gold and amber. We drove about 40 minutes outside Richmond, past quiet farmland and rolling hills dotted with old barns. The kind of landscape that feels like America at its core, honest, hard-working, without pretense. As we pulled up the gravel driveway, I expected, I'm not sure what. A modest home like mine. A mansion I didn't know. What I found was something in between: a large, beautifully restored farmhouse with a wraparound porch and rocking chairs, white columns, and warm lights glowing from inside. It wasn't ostentatious. It was elegant in a way that whispered rather than shouted quality. Michael glanced at me, nervous. A little, I confessed. They're going to love you, he said, squeezing my hand. Just be yourself. The door opened before we even reached it. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Dad, this is Emily, Michael said with a quiet smile. His father looked at me like I was already familiar. "It's good to finally meet you," he said warmly, offering a handshake that felt firm and sincere. "Michael's talked about you often." The word often caught me off guard. My parents rarely said anything positive about me to anyone, let alone often. Inside the house smelled like roasted chicken and fresh herbs. His mother, soft-spoken with silver hair pulled neatly into a bun, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "Oh, honey," she said, pulling me into a gentle hug, "we've been so excited to meet you." That was the moment I felt something inside me tremble, like a place that had long been numb was waking up. Dinner was simple, but delicious: roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, homemade rolls, and green beans from their garden. The conversation flowed easily. They asked about my work, my hobbies, my goals, not in a judgmental way, but in a genuine effort to understand me. At one point, Michael's father said, "Mike tells us you're thinking about going back to school. What would you study?" I hesitated. Nobody had ever asked me that without an undertone of criticism. I always loved business, I admitted. Marketing, maybe. But I never felt like it was realistic. Michael's mother tilted her head thoughtfully. "Why not?" "My parents think lofty goals are a waste of time," I said before I could stop myself. "They think ambition only counts if it belongs to my sister." They exchanged a knowing glance but didn't pry. Instead, his father said gently, "Well, we think you should chase whatever lights you up. Life's too short to live someone else's expectations." It was such a simple statement, yet it struck me with surprising force. My parents had never said anything close to that. After dinner, Michael and I helped his mother clear the table. She placed a hand on my arm as I reached for a stack of plates. "You have a good heart," she said softly. "I can see why Michael is so taken with you." I felt heat rush to my cheeks. "Thank you, I'm not used to hearing things like that." "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, "then you've been around the wrong people." Later that evening, Michael asked if I wanted to see the workshop. I assumed he meant a small home studio or sewing room. Instead, we drove 5 minutes down the road to a property that looked like an old mill. The moment we stepped inside, I truly understood for the first time who his family was. It wasn't just a workshop, it was a design house. Beautiful sketches layered the walls. Mannequins stood draped in fabrics I'd only seen in magazines: silk, organza, hand-embroidered lace. A small team worked quietly at sewing machines. Ribbons, trims, patterns, and couture detailing were everywhere. I turned in a slow circle. "Michael, what is this?" He rubbed the back of his neck, almost shy. "This is part of our family business." "Part," I echoed. He nodded. "The original studio, where my grandparents started everything." My mind spun. "Started what?" He hesitated, as if saying the words felt too heavy. "Carter and Row." I froze. Carter and Row. The Carter and Row. The fashion empire whose catalogs my mother circled like they were scripture. The brand Lily swore she'd model for someday. The label stitched into 3/4 of my sister's closet. I stared at him. You're that Carter." He shrugged. "My parents don't talk about it much. They're proud of the work, not the fame." I pressed a hand to my chest. "Michael, my family worships this brand." "I know," he said quietly. "You know?" He nodded. "I've seen how they treat you, how they talk about your sister, how everything is about status." He stepped closer, gently taking my hands. "That's why I didn't want you to think my family's name changed anything. I wanted you to know me first. Just me." Something inside me cracked open, then something soft, something long buried. Nobody had ever protected me from judgment before. Nobody had ever valued my heart over my resume. As we walked through the studio, Michael introduced me to a few seamstresses and designers. They greeted me not like I was the girlfriend of the boss's son, but like a welcome guest. My eyes drifted to a dress form in the corner, the simple silk gown I would later wear at my wedding. "Is that—" Michael smiled. "That's yours. Aunt Rebecca wanted you to have something no one else would ever wear. Something that felt like you." I swallowed hard. "It's perfect." He squeezed my hand. "So are you." That night, driving home under a blanket of stars, I realized something that should have been obvious earlier. The difference between Michael's world and mine wasn't money. It was humility, it was kindness, it was character. Michael's family had built an empire on integrity, craftsmanship, and generations of hard work. They valued people, not appearances, and in their quiet, grounded way they had already given me more love in one evening than my parents had given me in years. But of course my parents didn't know any of that, and when they finally did, it would shake the very foundation of everything they believed in. Because while they mocked my cheap dress, they didn't know the truth. They were wearing Carter and Row too. I should have trusted my instincts when my parents demanded a formal dinner with Michael's family after the wedding. They framed it as tradition. It's what respectable families do, my mother insisted, as if the Carters needed her instruction on etiquette. But the truth was simpler. They wanted to measure Michael's parents against the image they had crafted for themselves. They wanted to compare, to judge, to position themselves. They wanted to look important. And they were walking straight into the moment that would undo everything they thought they knew. The dinner was scheduled for the Saturday after the wedding. Michael's parents graciously offered to host, and when my father heard the address, he raised an eyebrow. "A farmhouse," he muttered. "Strange choice for people in the clothing business." My mother chimed in. "I expected something more upscale." She didn't bother lowering her voice. I squeezed Michael's hand under the table. He only gave me a small, reassuring smile. When Saturday arrived, my parents dressed like they were going to a political fundraiser. My father wore a navy blazer and polished loafers. My mother wore a pearl choker and a fitted dress she bragged about buying on sale, but from a very exclusive brand. Lily wore a tight black dress, an obvious attempt to look like a model off-duty. The farmhouse glowed warmly as we approached, lanterns lining the walk, and soft music drifting from inside. But the beauty of it was lost on my parents. Mom whispered, "Looks like they tried." Dad replied, "They're probably doing their best." Lily rolled her eyes. "Maybe they'll have connections after all. It wouldn't hurt to let them know I'm available for modeling work." I almost stopped walking. The delusion was breathtaking. Michael's mother opened the door with her usual gentle warmth. "Welcome," she said. "We're so glad you could join us." My parents plastered on tight, polite smiles. Inside, the table was set with understated elegance linen napkins, polished silver fresh flowers from the garden. The kind of setting that communicates real class, not purchased prestige. But my parents weren't impressed. My mother immediately leaned toward me and whispered, "This is cute, rustic, very cozy." She said cozy like one would say infestation. We sat. Michael's father began the conversation, as he always did, with genuine interest. "So, Tom," he said to my father, "how was the drive? Hope you didn't hit too much traffic." Dad lifted his chin. "We're used to better roads." Everyone at the table went still for half a second. Michael's father simply nodded. "Well, we're glad you made it." The small talk continued. Or rather, my parents continued their strange performance while Michael's family remained gracious. When salad was served, my mother asked, "And what do you all do in the clothing business? Retail alterations." She said alterations like it was an insult. Michael's mother smiled. "We do a bit of everything, really." My father pressed on. "And your son, he works in operations, right?" He said the word slowly, like tasting something unfamiliar. "Yes," Michael's father replied. "He oversees a number of—" But Dad interrupted, waving a hand dismissively. "Well, that's good. It's honest work. I suppose everyone needs someone to keep the paperwork moving." I nearly sank into the floor. Michael's father simply said, "We're very proud of him." Lily leaned forward. "So, which brands do you work with?" "Anything I'd recognize." "My friends say I should model for something big like Carter and Row." Michael's mother tilted her head. "Oh, is that her dream?" "It's not a dream," Lily said. "It's just a matter of time. I mean, they'd be lucky to have me." She gave a little laugh, tossing her hair. I wanted to grab her shoulders and shake her. Before anyone could respond, the doorbell rang. Michael's mother excused herself and returned with a beautifully wrapped box and a handwritten envelope. "A little something for you both," she said, placing it in front of me and Michael. "A wedding gift from the family. It arrived from the New York office this morning." My mother's eyes sharpened. "New York? What office is that?" Before I could answer, Michael's aunt, elegant as ever, entered from the hallway. I hadn't known she'd be joining us, but her presence shifted the entire room's energy. She greeted us warmly, then took the envelope. "Shall I?" she asked. Michael nodded. She opened the envelope and read aloud, "Congratulations to Michael and Emily Carter, welcome to the Carter and Rowe family." The words hung in the air like a struck bell. My mother blinked rapidly. My father's jaw slackened. Lily froze color draining from her face. My mother forced a laugh. "Carter and— I'm sorry, did you say Carter and Rowe? The Carter and Rowe?" Michael's aunt smiled gently. "Yes, the house has been in our family for 3 generations." My father swallowed. "And your son, he works for the company." Michael's father shook his head. "Not for the company, with it. One day he'll run it." Silence. Then Lily whispered almost inaudibly, "But I applied to their modeling program. I was waiting to hear back." Michael's aunt gave her a sympathetic look. "Yes, we reviewed your file. The decision was finalized last week." I could see Lily swallow hard. She already knew the answer. Michael's aunt continued kindly. "We felt your energy might be better suited to a different path. Modeling can be a difficult industry, and we only pursue candidates who demonstrate professional readiness." My sister crumbled. I can be professional. I didn't know." My mother jumped in. "Well, surely there's been a mistake. Lily is very talented. She just needs someone to give her a chance." Michael's aunt's expression remained gentle but firm. "We made our decision with care." My father tried again, his voice strained. Is there any way to reconsider?" "No," she said with a kindness that broke no argument. "The letter has already been signed." Mom's face went white. Lily's eyes filled with tears. My parents didn't understand humility until that moment, until the empire they worshipped stood before them and did not bend. They didn't understand me either, not until they saw the truth. I wasn't marrying beneath them. I wasn't the family failure. I wasn't the one who should be ashamed. And as I sat there at that table watching their world tilt sideways, I said nothing. Silence had never tasted so powerful. The car ride home after that dinner felt strangely quiet. No one shouted, no one argued. It was the kind of silence that comes after a building has already collapsed, and all that's left is the dust. We were still in Michael's parents' driveway when my mother turned to me. "Emily," she said, voice tight, "we need to talk. Alone. As a family." I glanced toward Michael's truck. He stood by the driver's side door watching me with that steady, patient look. I walked over to him first. "You okay to wait a few minutes?" I asked. "Take as long as you need," he said. Then softer, "You don't have to fix them tonight." That sentence settled something inside me. I'd spent most of my life thinking that was my job. I went back to where my parents and Lily stood under the porch light. The farmhouse glowed behind them. Out in the dark fields, crickets had started their nightly song. It was peaceful everywhere except in the little circle we made on the gravel. My father spoke first. "Why didn't you tell us?" he demanded. "Why didn't you tell us who he was, who his family is?" "Would it have mattered?" I asked. "Of course it would have," he snapped. "We made fools of ourselves in there. Do you have any idea how we looked?" "Yes," I said. "For the first time other people saw you the way I've seen you my whole life." My mother drew back like I'd slapped her. "How dare you talk to us like that?" "How dare you mock me at my own wedding?" I shot back. "You called me a failure in front of half the town. You laughed at my dress. You treated Michael like hired help. And now you're worried about how you looked." They weren't used to hearing my voice at full strength. My mother lifted her chin. "We were just being honest. We didn't want you to settle. We didn't want you to be small." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "I was never small. You just decided Lily was the star and I was the lighting crew." Lily's eyes were red around the edges. "You could have told me," she said. "You knew Carter and Rowe meant everything to me. You let me walk in there bragging. You watched me talk about modeling for them when you knew they'd already rejected me." "What did you want me to do?" I asked. "Announce at dinner. Hey Lily, the company you worship already reviewed your photos and said no." "You enjoyed watching me get humiliated," she hissed. "You've always been jealous." Jealous of what I asked quietly, of them putting every hope on you and none on me, of hearing, "We need Emily to help," while you heard, "We need Lily to shine." My father stepped closer, his voice tight. "If we'd known you were marrying into a family like this, we'd never have treated him the way we did." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." He frowned. "What do you mean?" It means you respect status, not character, I replied. You didn't care who Michael was. You only care now that you've seen the label inside his family's clothes. My mother's shoulders sagged a little. It was surprising that's all she said softly. You tied to Carter and Roe. It doesn't feel real. There it was not said cruelly, just honestly, we never thought you were that important. I took a slow breath. You know what isn't real. The story you've told yourselves for years that Lily is special, and I'm just the backup. That as long as she succeeds, it doesn't matter how you talk to me. My father rubbed his forehead. We were trying to give her opportunities we never had. And I didn't deserve any, I asked. I was the one who stayed with Grandma so you could take Lily to photo shoots. I was the one working nights so there'd be gas in the car and groceries in the fridge. I'm not angry, I helped. I'm angry you acted like that was all I was good for. They went quiet. Emily, my father said, finally, voice softer, we made mistakes. I can see that. But tonight, we were humiliated. So was I answered. For years. You just finally got a taste of what it feels like when other people hear the things you usually save for me. He looked at me, eyes tired. What do you want from us? For the first time, I realized I had an answer. I want you to understand that I'm not a kid begging for your approval anymore, I said. I'm a grown woman with a husband and a life, and I get to decide who sits at that table with me. My mother's voice shook. Are you saying you're cutting us out? I'm saying your invitation is suspended, I replied, for now. Lily's mouth fell open. You can't mean that. I do, I said. You don't get to insult my husband, call me a failure, and then expect a front row seat in my future. If you want a place in my life going forward, there are conditions. My father's jaw tensed. What conditions? Honest apologies, I said. Not, I'm sorry you feel that way. Real ones. Counseling if that's what it takes. No more pedestal for Lily while I'm the floor she stands on. No more jokes about me embarrassing the family because I didn't live the life you scripted. My mother's eyes filled with tears. We're your parents, she whispered. We're supposed to be there. You were supposed to be there when I needed you, I said gently. When I worked 2 jobs instead of going away to school. When I sat in the ER alone that night, I thought I was having a heart attack and it turned out to be anxiety. When I called you crying after a 12-hour shift and you told me you were too busy helping Lily with her makeup. She flinched, she remembered. I love you, I said. I always will. But love without respect isn't enough anymore. If you want to be part of my life, you're going to have to show me consistently that you see me as more than the family failure. No one spoke. The only sounds were crickets and a dog barking somewhere down the road. Finally, my father nodded once. We'll talk about it, he said quietly. Your mother and we'll figure out what to do. I hope you do, I replied, for your sake as much as mine. I stepped back. The space between us felt new, painful, but honest. I'm going home with my husband now, I said. You know what needs to happen if you want to see us again. I turned and walked toward Michael's truck. My legs felt shaky, but each step was firm. When I climbed in, he didn't ask for a play-by-play. He just reached over, took my hand, and held it. You stood up for yourself, he said quietly. I'm proud of you. As we pulled away, the farmhouse lights grew smaller in the rearview mirror. My parents stood in the driveway, framed by the porch light, looking unsure in a way I'd never seen before. And somewhere along that dark country road, with Michael's hand wrapped around mine, and my wedding dress folded carefully in the back seat, I realized something simple and freeing. The real revenge wasn't that they finally knew the price of my dress. The real revenge was that I finally knew the value of myself. I didn't expect my parents to change quickly. People don't undo decades of habits overnight. But something shifted after that night in the driveway, the night I finally said the things I had swallowed for years. Boundaries spoken clearly and calmly have a way of echoing long after the conversation ends. And in the weeks that followed, those echoes reached places inside my parents that I had long believed were unreachable. It started with silence. For the first 10 days after the confrontation, they didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up unannounced. For a while, I wasn't sure if they were angry, ashamed, or simply unsure what to do next. But Michael kept reminding me, silence isn't always punishment. Sometimes it's reflection. Then one quiet Sunday morning, my phone buzzed. A text from my father. "We're ready to talk when you are, not to defend ourselves, to listen." I stared at the screen for a long moment. That was the first time in memory he'd ever written a sentence without some form of justification tucked inside it. A few hours later, my mother reached out too. Her message was shakier. "I know I hurt you. I'm trying to understand how. I want to do better. Please let us see you when you're ready." It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And honesty, even if small, was a start. Michael sat beside me at the kitchen table reading the messages over my shoulder. "How do you feel?" he asked. "I feel surprised," I admitted, "and nervous." "That's okay," he said. "Healing often starts in uncomfortable places." We agreed to meet them later that week at a small community cafe neutral ground. The kind of place with mismatched mugs, wooden chairs polished smooth by years of use, and a chalkboard menu full of daily specials. A place far from the glamorous image my parents once clung to. A place rooted in real American life where people came not to impress but to be together. My parents were already seated when we arrived. They looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in the way people look when certainty has finally cracked. My mother rose first. Her eyes were red, not from makeup or allergies, but from something deeper. "Emily," she said softly, opening her arms. I hesitated only a moment before stepping into her embrace. It wasn't the tight, sweeping hug of a perfect movie reunion. It was tentative but real. When we all sat down, my father cleared his throat. "We've been talking," he began, folding his hands on the table. "And we realized we were wrong. Not just at the wedding, not just at dinner, for years." My mother nodded. "We pushed you aside. We acted like Lily was the only one who mattered. And we made you feel small because we were afraid of our own smallness." Her voice trembled, but she didn't stop. "I looked at you and saw everything I wasn't: steady, hardworking, decent in a way I didn't know how to be. I thought pushing Lily forward made me a good mother. But all I did was lose sight of you." I felt something loosen in my chest, something old and knotted. My father added, "And I worried more about how we looked to others than how we treated our own daughter. That wasn't leadership. That wasn't fatherhood. It was insecurity wearing a suit." For the first time in my life, my father looked genuinely ashamed. "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "It means more than you know. But understanding isn't enough on its own. Change takes action." "We know," my mother whispered. "We've started counseling, together." That stunned me. Those two wouldn't even agree on a takeout order half the time. "And we're taking a hard look at how we treat Lily too," my father added. "She's struggling with the modeling rejection, and we realized we set her up for disappointment by treating her dreams like guarantees." "Is she okay?" I asked softly. "She's hurting," my mother said. "But she's also thinking. For the first time, she's questioning the pedestal we put her on. And she asked if you would talk to her when you're ready." That surprised me even more than the counseling. "Maybe," I said honestly, "in time." We talked for almost 2 hours about the past, the present, and the work still ahead. They didn't expect instant forgiveness, and I didn't pretend to give it. But for the first time, I believed we were standing on ground solid enough to rebuild. As we left the cafe, my father touched my shoulder. "Emily," he said, voice low, "I'm proud of you. Not because of who you married or what his family owns. I'm proud because you finally stood up to us. You taught us something we should have learned long ago." I didn't say anything at first. Then "thank you. That means a lot." When Michael and I stepped into the bright afternoon sun, he slipped his arm around me. "That went well," he said. "It did," I agreed, better than I expected. "How do you feel now?" I thought about it carefully, lighter, stronger. He kissed my temple. "That's what happens when you choose yourself." In the weeks and months that followed, the change wasn't perfect, but it was steady. My parents learned to listen more and speak less. Lily started exploring new paths: photography, design, even community theater, without the crushing pressure to be perfect. She and I spoke more honestly than we ever had before. One afternoon she confessed I thought being the favorite meant I was winning, but really I was drowning. "You were the strong one all along." We hugged for a long time. And as for me, I began taking business courses at night. Michael encouraged every step. His family welcomed me into meetings, taught me about branding, marketing, leadership. Not because I was married to Michael, but because they believed I had something to offer. They were right. Months later, my parents joined us for a quiet Sunday dinner at the farmhouse. No pretense, no bragging, just conversation, laughter, and a sense of peace I never thought we'd find. As we sat on the porch afterward, drinking sweet tea and watching the sky fade to lavender, my mother leaned toward me. "You know," she said softly, "that wedding dress of yours. I've never seen anything more beautiful." I smiled. "It's not about the dress." "I know," she whispered. "It never was." And in that moment I realized something important. The revenge I once wanted wasn't the kind where someone falls, it was the kind where someone rises. I didn't destroy my family. I rebuilt it by refusing to let them destroy me. Life isn't about the price of a dress or the label inside it. It's about the courage to know your worth, the strength to set boundaries, and the grace to allow others to grow when they choose to. And if you're listening to this now, I hope you remember this. You don't have to stay small to keep the peace. You don't have to earn love by disappearing. And sometimes the quietest person in the family is the one who changes everything. If this story touched your heart, I'd be honored if you'd share it or leave a comment about where you're listening from. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, stories about strength, truth, and second chances, please consider subscribing. Thank you for spending this time with me. 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 Time with me.